Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're just going to allow one more minute for the group to gather, and then we'll kick things off.
Your phone's on.
Okay, let's get going. Thanks everyone for joining, and welcome to today's webinar, Reimagining Culture, the Astro Story. My name is Archana Ramesh, and I lead the People Science team for Glint, which is part of LinkedIn across Asia Pacific. And we're really pleased that you're able to join us today. This webinar is part of a series of webinars designed to provide insights into the new world of work and hear how organizations are transforming themselves with people at their center. So before we get started, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. All attendee lines are muted to improve the sound quality of our presenters. But we encourage questions, and please do feel free to submit your questions in the questions box on the right, and we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. And you can feel free to enter the questions at any time throughout the webcast. Lastly, we will be recording the webinar, and the recording will be made available on Bright Talk for you to watch again or share with your colleagues. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the star of today's fireside chat, Gavin Baxter.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Gavin. Thanks for joining us. Gavin has been with Astro since 2018, where he leads their human capital division, which aims to provide an amazing people experience for everyone at Astro through a culture of creativity, diversity, and collaboration. He also heads up Astro's property and services division. As a senior HR professional with over 16 years of experience working in both Australia and the UK, Gavin has spent the last 6 years in the technology and media sector as the group head of talent performance at Sky in the UK, where he developed and delivered the group's talent strategy. And prior to that, he was the head of organizational capability at Optus Business in Australia. In both roles, he was involved in the ongoing digital transformation of the organizations. He's also held senior roles in professional services firms such as Deloitte Australia and BDO Australia. And he started his career in the insurance industry, where he advanced into management roles in the UK and Australia at QBE and Royal Sun Alliance. So Gavin, again, thank you so much for joining us and for spending some time with us today. I would love to kick it off with asking you a question that we often ask people at LinkedIn, which is to share just one thing about yourself, which is not on your LinkedIn profile.
Okay, good question. So hello, everyone. Good to, well, I can't see you, but maybe good to hear you later through questions. I'm calling from KL in Malaysia, so it's afternoon time here, so good morning or evening. To your question, I haven't added any language skills to my profile. So having been here for 2 years now, I know at least 10 words in both, or in Bahasa, in Cantonese, in Mandarin, and in Tamil, but only 10 words.
The 10 most important words, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us. Great. Well, let's get right into it then. We're gonna, of course, talk a lot about Astro, which, for those of you of us in the audience who might not be as familiar with Astro, can you start by just telling us a little bit more about the company and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I've just got a slide here which I'll bring up because it's a bit easier to talk about. So in brief, Astro is Malaysia's broadcaster. It's #1 pay TV operator. So a good comparison to this would be either multicast in South Africa, it would be Comcast in America, it would be Sky in the UK. As you can see from this slide, we have a range of products and services we deliver to Malaysians. Being the sole pay TV provider, we serve 5.7 million households, which equates to being having some presence in the household up to 75% across Malaysia. We are the leading content provider, and we provide content across all of those languages that I mentioned before, which makes us a very unique provider. We don't just provide Western content, we provide it in Bahasa, we provide it in Chinese, and we provide it in Indian as well. On top of that, we have a digital platform or multiple digital platforms, which we can use to push out content and also to help our digital business on providing entertainment across the country. And what's quite unique to us as a pay TV broadcaster is that we have a very substantial radio network, which includes 11 separate brands and 17 million weekly listeners across those brands and stations. And then finally, we have a e-commerce or a home shopping channel and platform. This is in multi languages. It's 24/7, and again, we have 2.6 million users on that platform. So in essence, you can see we have a range of services, and our aim and our existence is to both entertain and inform Malaysians using all these products and services. Hope that's given a good overview of our business.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. And you're right. It clearly is a business that does a lot of different things and offers a lot of different services. And with any organization as diverse as that, I can imagine it's hard to make change happen. And one of the reasons we're here to talk today is because of some of the tremendous work that Astro has done on its culture transformation. So before we talk about the details of the transformation, I would love for you to first share some of the reasons behind the change and how Astro went about it. What was the business case for the culture transformation journey that you've been on for a while now? Okay, thanks. So I suppose we're very similar to any business, whereby if you just sit still, you become irrelevant. So like I say, the same as most businesses, we needed to review where we're at. We need to review where we need to go, and look at that transformation as appropriate across the business. As we embarked on this transformation, it felt natural to also look at the culture as part of that transformation, to both look at a way to re-engage our employees, but also to make sure that we had the right culture to deliver on that transformation. So as you can see on this slide, as with all businesses, but in particular around content, we're under massive competition. Over the last few years, things like Netflix, services like YouTube have become very big providers of content. If I look at my own kids, they mostly watch YouTube now. So we needed to really transform to say, how do we compete with this competition, and how do we sell our own unique services? Because we have around about 180 channels of content. At the same time, there's been an increase in what customers expect when they come to organizations and services around the type of experience they get, either in buying a product, receiving service on that product. And we needed to continually invest in our customer experience. And if you looked at that previous slide where we had several different business models and departments, that started to create some silos within the business. So as part of our transformation, we wanted to work more across the business rather than up and down in silos. So a big push on collaboration. And if I was sort of add all of those up, we really need to stop customers leaving us. And we want to do the opposite, where we want to get customers to join us. So if that's the sort of business challenge that we faced, we needed to make sure we had the right culture in place to do that. And we strongly believe, I think as Peter Drucker mentioned way back, that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
So we're able, at the same time as doing this transformation, to embark on that culture journey as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that context. It sounds like clearly there were some external market pressures that caused Astro to think about how you could continue to evolve yourselves to be more relevant for your customers, provide the type of experience that you wanted to for your customers, and quickly recognize that culture transformation was a critical part of that journey that you were embarking on as well, which is great.
Yep.
When you think about some of the critical components of the culture transformation roadmap, how did you decide where to start? And what were some of the tools that you used to support these initiatives? And how did you really kind of lay out what that roadmap for the transformation was going to be?
Okay, sure. So I'll leave this slide on for now, but really what those three elements on that slide equate to is that you can only do this transformation if it starts from the top. So you can have some impact when you do a bottom-up approach, but you're not going to get the pull through into the transformation agenda unless you start at the top. So what this really meant from our perspective was to getting the whole leadership team together and to understand what we needed to do to look at our business imperatives. So what were the big things we were looking at in sort of a 1 to 3 year horizon, and how that type of culture that we wanted could support that, because culture exists in all companies, and that could be good culture or bad culture. It depends if you want to actively manage your culture as part of your change process. And as I said at the start, this has to start from the top. So some of the tools we used were, first of all, was to conduct this exercise that took us forward into the future to look at that operating culture, but was also to analyse the feedback we had from our staff to say, what are some of the key points that our staff are raising that really, if we were to address it, it would accelerate both our transformation plans, but also our culture plans as well.
That makes sense. And so to that point around making sure that you were getting feedback from the ground on the things that needed to evolve as part of your culture, how did employee feedback guide and inform your business decisions related to the culture transformation journey? Obviously, you've been using Glint as part of that, but just stepping back from that, how did feedback shape your strategy around culture transformation?
Yeah, I think the first thing that was important was, unless you give employees a trusted place to give feedback, you're not going to get the accurate information you need. People will feel that that their individual feedback can be found out and it can be traced back to them. So what we ensured by using Glint, that we would give them this trusted place, this trusted platform, where they are able to share their honest feedback. We did that across the organisation. At the time, we had around 4,800 employees, so it was a big exercise to undertake. And we received about a 95% participation rate. So by going by that, we were quite happy that we'd really found the pulse and the feel for the business. The second thing I think that really helped us was that if employees give feedback, they want to hear that their feedback's been heard. If they feel that they've given information and feedback and it just went into a vacuum, they'd feel very demotivated. So we use Glint's sort of analytics and reporting tool, which was able to give us that information in a very short period of time. We probably had the data we wanted within a few days of having closed that survey. From a culture perspective, and it sort of linked back to that previous slide, what it showed us was that there was a need for us to improve our customer focus. Some of our processes weren't as lean as possible. Some of the way that we moved customers around the sort of customer service chain and didn't resolve their queries at the point of need was shown quite heavily. So that gave us a bit of direction to take. But I think that end part of your question around what surprised us, one of the questions we asked in the survey, I think it was called "What else is on your mind?" So it was an open feedback question, and we had over 13,000 comments on that one question, and you can see from that people had a lot to say to us. And I think, I'm sure you've worked with other clients who've had a lot of data. It's almost impossible to sort through and manage that. But again, what we were blessed with was using the tool that was available, that was able to really give us that substance of the comments. What were the themes that were coming up? We looked at word clouds. And again, that also said we needed to look at customer focus. It did talk favorably about other parts of the business. So the tool gave us, those dual angles, one around where we needed to focus on, and two, where we needed to celebrate success as well.
That's great. It sounds like the feedback from employees, obviously validated some of your assumptions going in, but also gave you a lot of new information and new things to explore as well. And actually, we love that question. What else is on your mind, for that reason? Because it really does open up that conversation. It's almost like a two-way conversation at that point with your employees, and the change feels like it's not something that's happening to them, but with them, and they're part of the process as well, which is great.
I agree. I think they need to feel part of that process. And I was really strict on getting that feedback back to the teams. So initially we had a company-wide town hall, but in Malaysia we're spread across the country, so we were able to broadcast that out across the country to our different offices, and we were able to highlight these key points of feedback, and then each department was able to get their own results. Because we could filter it within Clint and then play those results out down across their organization. And it was getting that feedback out, showing and telling our people that we heard you, we've listened, and this is what we want to do about it, was really important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And to your earlier point about not just making this a survey activity for the sake of it and making people feel like, well, I participated in the survey, I gave feedback, and then what now, right? But really making it clear that there's a commitment to act on the feedback and commitment to drive change based on the feedback.
Agree.
Yeah. And what were some of the specific things that you did with that feedback? Obviously, you've achieved some pretty incredible outcomes as a result of your efforts so far. Areas such as customer focus, collaboration, which, by the way, are not easy things to fix or to improve quickly. In fact, you've, as an organization, you've managed to improve them dramatically, not only in just within a short period of time, but in the midst of one of the most uncertain times we're facing collectively as a globe. So what's been the key here? How have you used that feedback to then drive change and take specific actions?
Yeah, sure. I'll just show a slide just to show our progress on this. So those area in particular around where we've had a 10-point increase. So I think it's important to note that we use different benchmarks here compared to percentages. So we always talk about points increase rather than percentages. What we've seen here, as you can see, when we first did our test, our feedback test in March last year, we scored 68, and then we've steadily increased up to 74. So we've still got a way to go. We want to get to 82 as far as our long-term target is. So that's for engagement. And if you look down below, you can see the sort of 3 to 5 points that we've had those big increases in. So thankfully, we have had an increase in customer focus, but we've also increased in collaboration and continuous improvement. if I take those three as an example, if you went back to my first slide, which I'll quickly flip to. If you went back to this slide, you can see that, what we wanted to achieve as part of the transformation, some of those increases we saw through the survey are actively working towards them. So collaboration went up by 10 points. Customer focus went up by 10 points. The process improvement went up by 10 points. And that cuts across both, working collaboratively and customer experience as well. So we have seen these increases. If I show one more slide here, going back to your question around what have we done, you can see there's a range of activities on here. Now these sort of represent a very sort of media type of company where they're very bright, they're very based on content and based on people. But to pull out a couple in particular, you can see where we've redesigned our office space. Again, if you want to work collaboratively, you need to have the physical environment set up correctly for it. We did some fun videos on the top left around having no silos. And a key sort of delivery of having no silos was to have people look down and share across our company scorecard, so that our main company KPIs were held by more people in the organisation, therefore reducing silos and really driving that sort of collaborative approach that works across our business. And then I'll talk a bit more in a minute around some of the recognition and some of the viral campaigns that we did. But that was really the sort of summary of some of the points we took from the survey, and then how we were able to use some tools and delivery mechanisms to help improve that even more.
Got it. So the feedback that you received, you identified some clear opportunities, made sure that you communicated that very clearly down to all the different people in the organization, made sure you had follow-up actions and specific programs that were tailored towards the specific behaviors that you're looking to influence. As an example, collaboration, where you're looking to remove silos. And I do, by the way, love that video where that's probably the most fun video about performance management and scorecards.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah,
I think one point to note here is it's important to pick the activities you want to do that you can achieve within a reasonable time frame, because I think staff are expecting some action to take. And they need to take, you want to take that before you do another survey, because you're not going to have the opportunity to see any impact of that. So, if I look at the office space part that we did, we were already in design of a new building. So we were able just to tweak that design to make it more collaborative than it was originally planned. I think if you've already got an existing building with a setup, that can obviously take a lot more work to get that redesigned. So again, it's looking at what's achievable within a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And frankly, this is a conversation I have with a lot of companies about sort of launching into these multi-year action efforts and, just trying to do it all and try to fix it all. And frankly, the world's moving too quickly, changing too quickly for us to be able to take that type of approach. So I love that advice around, pick what's achievable within a short period of time, show the impact, and continue that journey, right? Yeah. Speaking of change and things that are happening right now, obviously global pandemic, I'm sure, you'll tell me if it threw a wrench in your plans and your cultural transformation efforts. And obviously there's some novel and important challenges that we've all faced in our organizations across the world that we would not have predicted. So how did you evolve or not your culture transformation initiatives with all the curveballs that COVID threw at you?
There's one that really stands out, and again, it all links back to our transformation plan. So if we go back to, in Malaysia, March was when we had our what was called a movement control order, which was quite a big lockdown within the country. Now, obviously, with Malaysians being at home more, one of the ways to cope with that is to watch more TV, and also to listen to the news and watch the news as well. So what we were able to do, and this was of some people working from home, was we all got together very quickly. So we were working in a very collaborative manner. And what the output we were able to provide was we gave our news channel and our entertainment app, which had all our channels on. We were able to quickly give that free to all Malaysians. So regardless of if they're a customer of ours or not, we gave them the channel that they could keep informed on. And we also gave them access to our entertainment. And that result obviously was well received. And we ended up getting the most trusted news outlet, news provider during the pandemic, or the initial stages of the pandemic. And from a staff's perspective, it was really empowering, because something that would normally take quite a few months to get ready, because there's license rights, there's technology issues, but because everyone came together quite well, that was seen as a real positive. And the second one is, and it was linked back to, I'll just show it on the slides. It's the bottom right one on this slide, which is called Together at Astro. So we were classed as an essential service during this lockdown. In effect, that meant that our customer service staff could still go into the office. Our broadcast staff could go into the office. That's two that I'll call out. And the majority, and it was about 70%, the majority of the other staff were at home. So what we did to sort of thank our people, what we called our frontliners, we quickly did a video. You can see a screenshot of it there, where we got our staff to write down just tokens of thanks, and we're able to broadcast that out to all our frontliners, to make them feel that they're not in there on their own, but the rest of our staff and their colleagues, even though they're at home, they're back at, they're backing them. They've got their back. So that was a real good example of still being able to continue our efforts on cultural transformation as we went through that very uncertain time. And I think what else this helped us as well is that as part of this cultural transformation, and you might have seen it on some of the earlier slides, we identified 3 values that were going to be really key to us driving this transformation. So one was inclusive, the second was accountable, and the third was creative. And if you look at that first example I gave around coming together to release the free services to Malaysians, that's really being creative. We couldn't have done that, like I said, as quick as we could if we hadn't all come together and worked through these problems in a creative way. And then the viral video is a great example of being inclusive. So making sure that our staff all felt as one and as one team, even though some were at home and some were in the office. So yes, it slowed down some of the activities, and it caused us to rethink. But I think those 2 examples are great evidence of us still being able to move forward.
Yeah, such powerful examples. And I love that, because what you've just illustrated is that, some things did change, as with any plan and with any change effort. It's messy. It's never as clean as it is on paper, but that you were still grounded on the values and the sort of the true north of the leaders we're looking to drive.
Yeah, that's right. The true north. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, that example of the campaign around kind of bringing that inclusive feeling for those who are still working in the offices, that's so powerful. So it's simple and powerful, because in fact, in working with a lot of clients, we very early on during the pandemic, we noticed that trend where a lot of the communication was tailored towards the people who are suddenly working remotely and working from home. And understandably, there was a lot of change going on for that segment of the workforce. But in the meantime, a lot of essential workers and frontline workers were saying, hey, remember us? We're still in the offices. Things have changed for us as well. What about us? So clear that you identified that, and with that value to be more inclusive, thought about how we could build more empathy with that group, which is really cool.
Yeah. And like you say, very easy to do. People just use their phones, record it, and then we stitch it together. So although I'm sure my team would say it was actually harder to pull together. But
we like to say simple, not easy, right?
Definitely.
But not necessarily easy to execute. Always a good distinction. Love it. I'm going to ask you one last question before we transition over to the questions, which are absolutely coming in, and folks continue to pose your questions in the Q&A channel. So just to kind of wrap up the storyline here, let me just ask what you have moving forward. What does the next phase of this work look like? Obviously, there is a lot of uncertainty around the future, specifically in Malaysia, but frankly, in lots of other parts of the world as well. So how do you think about this, the evolution of these efforts, and continuing to balance the kind of the plan with the agility of the uncertainty of the future?
Yeah, okay. Like you say, it is uncertain. Malaysia's just gone into another lockdown, although on a slightly more relaxed basis. But again, we still have a lot of staff working from home. I think there's two things that would stand out. I think on Monday next week, we're doing another Glint survey. So we do 2 a year at the moment, and our plan is to get even more frequent. So the one we're doing on Monday consists of 4 questions only, instead of the usual sort of 25 or 27 questions. Again, we call it a pulse survey to get that real pulse of the business. And I think we see this as a good opportunity, because it's the first time we've run this, during an actual a lockdown. So it will be an opportunity for us to see where our staff are at. And I think we'll use that opportunity to see what way we pivot going forward on both our cultural plan, but I think it'll also be very useful for the business to see where we're at on our business transformation strategy. We did schedule some face-to-face sessions that we were going to do, particularly with our leaders, and that's now, that looks not likely for the time being. So we need to have a rethink about that. But we're not seeing this as it derailing our plans at all. It will probably cause us to pivot and to move in a different direction. But it all starts with that next Glint survey on Monday, and then we'll hopefully get those results in a few days or a week, and then that will give us the intelligence and the analytics and the insight on where we need to move forward.
So it sounds like what you're saying is you don't know what you don't know, but that's why getting feedback on a more frequent basis is going to be really pivotal to defining that roadmap. And like you already said, using that feedback to identify critical areas, and then figuring out what's achievable in the next few months to really show action on that feedback before we kind of.
Yeah. I think we've got a large workforce as far as organisations in Malaysia go, and we absolutely need to, as you said before, we need to get them involved. We need to show that their contribution matters and that their feedback matters. So rather than going off on our own direction, we need to absolutely get the feedback and then take stock and see where next.
Well, on that note, we'll transition over to some of the questions that are coming in through the Q&A. Q&A. And yeah, thanks so much for sharing your journey and kind of how you've been thinking about it, how you've been evolving it, frankly. So just looking at some of the questions that are coming in, I'm going to start with this one. And frankly, this was something I was thinking about as well. As part of your culture transformation, what role did leadership play? And how was leadership development impacted by the key pillars of your change strategy? You did mention at the very beginning of your journey, you did start from the top, and starting from the top is incredibly important. So yeah, talk a little bit more about what you did to engage your leaders and how this impacted your leadership development efforts.
Yeah, okay. So just starting from the start again, starting from the top again. So yes, we involved that leadership group from day one. And that wasn't a quick exercise. That was about a day long, where we systematically walked through the type of culture we want. Now, we had to realize quite early on where our current culture was at. Then work out the target culture, and then the gap in between and the activities we need to took. What we then did from that next step is the leadership team received coaching. So that relates to the question around development. But again, that wasn't generic business coaching. That was coaching around culture. So we used the analogy, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard, is that a leader casts a big shadow. And we needed to make sure that what was coming down from that top, what was in the shadow, was really driving that culture that we wanted. And in particular, linked to those three values that I talked about. So it started off with them. The development was, first of all, around coaching. And then we held several sort of face-to-face workshops. And the analogy we used from one of our providers was that leaders need to get off the dance floor and to get onto the balcony. And what we used to term balcony time. And that's when you sort of remove yourself from that operational aspect, from that day-to-day business. And media is a very fast-paced business, so it's easy to get caught up. And then we decided, if we had that balcony time, what would we do with it? So for me and two of my colleagues, excuse me, we decided we'd have no meetings on a Friday, and we would use that time to start to think about different areas of the business that we need to look at, do some research, do some reading, but really use that time in a constructive way to get off that dance floor, so to speak.
I love that analogy. And like you said, it's so incredibly important to get the leaders aligned on this change journey at the very beginning, because of course, people do as leaders do, not as they say necessarily. So for the leaders to embody those culture changes is so incredibly important. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Another question coming in is around, okay, so this person's saying, I believe cultural transformation, it will be in sync directly or indirectly with employee experience. And so what are your thoughts on this? And did Astro establish any initiatives in regards to talent mapping and calibration to drive the right talent to the right role? So I think this is talking about, how do you kind of marry up the culture transformation initiatives to other things around your talent strategy and making sure you're providing employees the experience that they want at the company?
Yeah, we've done a couple of initiatives. To be honest, we need to do more in this space as well. Excuse me. I think the first one is through our graduate program. So, sorry, my voice. To change your culture, first of all, the easiest way to do that, in one sense, is when you hire people, to hire them in with the right skills. It's a lot harder by taking employees who are existing and sort of forcing them into a different cultural direction. So one of the things we did is, when we hire graduates, we've got a sort of biannual graduate program, we start to map them into the roles that we want. So we look at where the business is growing, where the business is expanding, and we start to map our graduates into that. So from an employee experience perspective, they're starting to map across. We've since started to look at a rotation program, and this is where we will identify individuals and start to move them around the business to give them that broader exposure. And as part of the performance management framework, we do two things. One is we do an annual succession plan where we look about 2 layers down from our CEO. And the second, when it comes round to that end of performance period, we do a calibration session across the whole business, where we don't just evaluate our high performers, but when we do find the individuals that are well known, we do talk about their development and what next for them. And the final one, as part of that whole performance management system, we ask our employees to develop the cultural values. So 10% of their total end of year performance is dedicated to the values. So what it's effectively saying is you can't just get away with delivering your KPIs. You need to be able to do them in a inclusive, accountable, and a creative way.
That tied to of those values to really all aspects of talent and performance management.
Yeah, embed them into all of the systems. I mean, we talk about culture as being behaviorally driven. So again, what I mentioned about leaders in particular, it's about process driven, and performance management process is the key process within that. And we talk about symbols and rituals. So the way we conduct meetings, is that driving our cultural behaviors? Is it very inclusive? Have we got the right people in the meeting? You know, is it collaborative in the sense of being able to share the right information in the meetings? And then the physical workspaces, as I talked about before, is a great symbol of your culture as well.
Absolutely. And it's so important to consider all of those different levels and layers of culture in the transformation.
Yeah, if you just focus on one lever, so the classic lever to focus on is behavior. Right. If you just pull that behavior lever and not look at the other two, your rate of progression will be lower.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So many questions coming in. So one of the questions is, did you face with everything you just described, did you face any challenges with the acceptance of these transformation initiatives from your employees or from leaders for that matter? And if you did face any resistance, well, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so yes, of course we've had some resistance. So the biggest one would be breaking the way we used to work. And a good example of that is sometimes the level of approvals required are quite substantial. And what those level of approvals are associated with is the systems and processes that follow it. And to sort of unpick and change some of that is very difficult. We ran a program called Idea Bank. And the aim of this program was for staff to just highlight where those processes or systems could be improved. And we got a lot of entries in. Some of them proved to be too difficult because they're sort of baked into some IT or some systems. But we've been able to make some easy changes. And I've been able to do the same in HR, where we're able to have the empowerment to change and reconfigure those processes and systems.
And I love that. And obviously, again, sort of the theme that we talked about before, which is, of course, change is hard. Of course, you're going to face resistance to change, but when you make people part of the change, then you really get that buy-in on this is happening with you, not to you, right?
Yeah, and this idea bank, the way we'd set it up was that the individual that had thrown the idea into the bank was the one that had to drive it. And that drove that accountability. So going back to one of our initial values, because we can all put in things that we want to change, but unless you own it and drive it, the success rate's going to be quite low.
Very cool. Love that. Yeah, and love that. Not so subtle reinforcement of the value you're looking to drive.
Yes,
right. So, exactly. Great. There's a couple of questions about sort of some of the things you mentioned at the very beginning around, again, getting the leadership buy-in and kind of establishing that gap between where you were and where you wanted to go. You'd mentioned you had done some assessment around measuring the current culture and how big the gap was between the current and expected culture. So just some curiosity around how did you do that and what were some of the things you specifically used to measure?
Sure. So we used an external company to help us. And what this company had built up over numerous companies they'd worked with and organizations was 7 different cultural archetypes. And what we were able to do was to map out those 7 archetypes, and effectively through I'll do it through a card sort exercise, although it was done more technology advanced through an iPad. We're able to almost vote what type of culture we wanted forward to go forward. So, you know, one of the cultural archetypes was customer centricity. There was one about being high performance. There's one around creativity. And through this voting process, you start to see the type of culture that you want. And really one of the key factors was that culture, in the sense organization culture, is made up of several of these archetypes. It's not just one. So they show the ratings that they come out sort of 1 to 7. And then you sort of take the top 3 and it starts to form what your culture, your target culture should look like.
Got it. Clearly a very sort of thorough process of assessing and defining who you want to be as well.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. There's a couple of questions here that I'll kind of tie together. One is, going back to this person's asking, how do you compel top management to start the change? How did Astro do that? And then equally, I got a question around how do you sustain the change? How do you sustain the momentum around the change? So can you talk a little bit more about, going back to the alignment with the leadership, how did you get this to become a problem everyone wanted to solve together? Or not, and how do you now maintain that momentum on this when clearly, everyone's busy, everyone has their day jobs, the media business is fast moving. How do you sustain momentum on it?
Okay, I think you need a burning platform. It's hard to initiate this without that. Now, in a sense, the timing came together very well. So as I said to you, we'd seen the need for transformation change. We'd just had a new CEO come in who was keen to drive change. A CEO who was he's very open to ideas, very in touch with the business. And when we talked about how cultural change can help drive this, he was on board quite early on. And it's not culture for culture's sake. In listed companies, private companies, culture is about delivering shareholder returns or profit. So we needed quite a sort of pointy-ended culture. And we sort of worked around the rest of the leadership group. Now, quite a few of the leadership group, what we call pioneers. Astro is only just over 25 years old. So they've been here a long time. However, they could see that the organization needed to transform. So we'd created, part come across a burning platform to drive this change. But using the words culture is about performance, culture is about accelerating you getting to where you want to go. That really helped as well. And sorry, what was the second part of that question?
the second part of that question is really around how do you sustain that momentum and really get busy?
Yeah, I think you can't take your foot off the pedal. So I think from HR's perspective, it's important to get across that we don't own culture. It can't be seen as an HR-owned initiative. It has to be business-owned. And in effect, it has to be the CEO and the executive owned. I think HR's role is to really hold the mirror up, to keep providing those nudges. And yes, sometimes it's not going to be the number one priority. And you've got to be a bit agile and adaptable. But keep nudging the leadership, keep showing how it's got that business front end to it.
Yeah, and I do love that what you mentioned around the link between, again, it's not culture for culture's sake, and sometimes then it becomes, culture is the soft stuff or the people stuff that no one has time for, but in fact it's culture.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's helping you deliver the business outcomes that you need to. And in fact, there's a question around this. So there's a question around how do you measure the business impact and the return on investment from culture transformation?
Yeah, so you can, there's quite a few culture evaluation tools out there, and indexes, and they're all benchmarked. But for us, I'll go back to what we said at the start. We want to get the pulse of our employees. We use the Glint tool to do that. What we did in the last Glint survey is we actually inserted some cultural questions into the survey, both qualitative and quantitative. So we're starting to see the data from that. And as I showed on that one slide where we're starting to see the incremental increases, we sort of put the correlation between an engaged workforce is the one that's going to deliver us discretionary effort. And with all companies who are under resource pressure and cost pressure, we need people performing to realize our sort of goals, our transformation goals. So our primary measure is through that activity. The second one is we do a survey at the end of our town halls, and we have sort of 2 town halls a week. A week. That would be quite disruptive. I think 2 town halls a year. And the last one we asked is, do you see the values as just words? And the resounding, I think it was about 70 or 80% of the staff said, no, we see them more as words. We see them in action. So I think you do need those quantitative feedback points. But rather than have a separate survey about culture and a separate survey about engagement, we've just linked them together under Glint.
Yeah, I love that. And I know I've been working closely with your team on that part. And that's what I love about it, because it really marries, again, it's not culture for culture's sake. It's not engagement for engagement's sake, but it's all comes together to say engagement is the outcome, is the thing that drives discretionary effort and organizational performance. And how we do that is through our culture and the way that we operate, right? And so then we met values. And
I think you've got to be careful about survey fatigue as well. Giving staff various surveys to fill out, their tolerance level's quite low. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. All right. Again, quite a few other questions coming in, but maybe I'll just have one more wrap before we wrap up here. So with the current COVID-19 outlook, how are you thinking about your strategies around employee experience? How is Astro rethinking, how you're going to continue to evolve your employee experience in this potentially, virtual, remote, flexible world?
Yeah. So first of all, we invested in the technology quite early on. So Microsoft Teams is our main delivery platform for virtual meetings, and it took us a while to get used to it, but we've adapted quite well. And what we've started to see across the business is the same as probably most people here, is we have sometimes we have daily touch points, stand-ups. We're trying to be collaborative in the way that we work. We're looking at some events at the end of the year where we try to recognise people, and even if they're at home, we're looking for what we would say in Malaysia as a makan, which is just eating generally, but doing that in a virtual way where people can come together. So employee experience is going to be hard, I think, in this virtual world. I attended an exec meeting this week, and there was a lot of stuff that people had put on a whiteboard, and we had the camera tracking across it, and it worked quite well. So we've got a few different techniques. As far as driving culture goes, then again, we'll continue to do videos. We'll continue to push some of our products out that way.
Love that. And it sounds like, again, the true north will be the values and the culture you're looking to drive, and how do we do everything to be more inclusive, to be more accountable, to be more creative, which sort of all ties that together. Wonderful. I certainly learned a lot through our conversation today, Gavin. I'm sure our audience did as well. Thank you so much for sharing this really, frankly, really transformative effort that your team has been spearheading for Astro. It's not always that, again, you can do this, you see this type of change manifest in such a short period of time and during a period of such uncertainty. And we didn't make big enough of a point around some of the actual tangible quantitative increases you've seen in areas like customer focus and collaboration, which certainly don't change overnight, but clearly your dedication and focus to the culture transformation activities have yielded you the type of outcomes that you have. So thanks again for sharing with us and sharing some really tangible things that your team has been doing, and good luck for all that is to come with the pandemic and beyond.
Yes, thanks very much. It was great chatting to you, and stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, bye.